There's a lot of grey-haired employers in the room. We should ask them. I think what we've certainly seen a shift in attitude by older workers themselves wanting to work longer, and there's quite a bit of data around now indicating that willingness for people to choose to work longer. The issue of better recognising what older workers can provide has been increasingly picked up by human resources studies, which show that older workers, for example, have greater loyalty to their employer, greater ownership of tasks, they're more consistent in the work they provide, they take fewer sickies than the few Gen Xs and Gen Ys who are in the room. So those strengths, I think, are being increasingly appreciated by the HR parts of businesses, but that needs to now be moved on to those who make bigger decisions around it. So I think there's a bit of a trend there, but it has a long way to go. And it should be unacceptable to have people out of work for 62 weeks simply because of their age. And that's the simple statistic at the end of the day, that governments and their advisors and the bureaucracy need to accept, that 62 weeks compared to 20 weeks for a person simply based on an age difference is unacceptable.
Lani Vasi.
You said that there's been greater activism among older Australians in recent times. Do you think that the older population were largely neglected in the election campaign? And also, just on the comments that you made about aged care being as important as broadband and various other issues, do you think that the National Broadband Network will improve the health outcomes for older Australians in rural and remote areas?
Okay, the second one first. There's no doubt that the opportunities in the use of the broadband network and linking that up to medical services provides great opportunities. So the opportunity for diagnostics and treatment being provided remotely, and access to specialists of all persuasions does provide a great opportunity. What I was saying about the importance of broadband, though, compared to aged care, is about the community. So that in communities, broadband is a great thing, and it will help a community to prosper and thrive, hopefully. But on the other hand, some really fundamentals about local communities, in regional and rural Australia particularly, are about the makeup of those communities, about ensuring that they are diverse and reflective of other communities. Providing for aged care locally is as important as having a school locally, having the local courthouse not closed up, having the local train service maintained. Packing people up and sending them 400 or 500 kilometres to the coast to be in an aged care home is no answer for those people or for that community. Hence the importance of aged care is as important as broadband in that sense. Your second question was around the issue of the last election. Look, I think the nature of the last election was not too many subsets of the community gained a lot of focus from the major parties. Both the government and the opposition provided a series of sweeteners to deal with older Australians. Not the same ones. I think if they were combined, there would be more of a package there, but individually, certainly some offerings there. Older Australians or seniors issues made the agenda slightly, but very much at the fringes.
Laurie Wilson.
You talked about the problem of burnout, I should say, for carers, and I think anyone who has had any experience in that area knows how difficult it is, and increasingly difficult it is, whether it's a disadvantaged child or a disabled person of any age or an older person who needs a carer. How serious is the problem from your perspective, and what more can be done about it? What should the governments take action on this, but it never seems to be enough.
In terms of how serious the problem is, we certainly have a lot of feedback from our own folk who are in that situation and the challenges they face. It's always been an important issue for us. I guess its significance was highlighted when, during the preparation of our work, we spoke with two very, very senior frontline clinicians and a geriatrician who see the issue on a daily basis. and their message to us as we went through all our health priorities with them was, over all these issues, dental health and subacute care and access to specialists and whatever else, the thing that you need to remember is that the provision of respite for carers is absolutely critical, that they're already seeing burnout occur amongst older Australians who are caring for partners or children or whatever the case may be, and that if we're not very careful, we as a society and a community are going to do a lot of damage to people who actually contribute a whole lot to society now, and that's underappreciated. I know that governments have invested more in this space. I think there's the opportunity for more to happen, and particularly for the longer term, for planning to be underway now to deal with the respite needs that will just grow and grow and grow as we go forward. And part of that needs to be more flexible approaches to respite. So whether it's putting the person who's in care into a respite situation, or allowing the carer to go and have some respite elsewhere, whether it's providing respite opportunities for someone who might be working, so allowing them to continue to work, but take mum or dad, whoever it might be, to a respite care place on a daily basis. That kind of flexibility is part of the answer that we need longer term. Respite needs a lot more attention. It needs a major investment, continuing major investment as we go forward.
Tony Melville.
Just as an aside at first, I think with the retirement age going up to 67 and with us all living longer, I don't know whether your definition of seniors as being the over 50s is maybe should move up as well. But my question is about climate change. I assume your research shows that older people think as much about themselves as they do about their next generation and what they're leaving to their children and their grandchildren. I just wanted you to elaborate a bit more, given your growing political power, if you like, as we all age, just what your position is in more detail on the climate change options.
Certainly the issue of legacy is one that's important to older Australians, whether it's their financial legacy or their family legacy, or, in this case, their environmental legacy. And I guess as we've talked to people, one of the messages or the themes that comes through from those discussions has been around, well, I was part of the development generation in the 40s or 50s or 60s. Perhaps I did help to create some of these problems that are there now, and I'm not comfortable with passing it on to my children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren, as the case may be. So the environment generally is certainly an issue that comes up high in the top half a dozen issues of concern to older Australians. So no doubt about its significance there. In terms of the response at the moment, we don't have a preferred position at this point. We are very conscious of the impact of increased energy charges that seem to be a bottom line that flows through in all the options at the moment. The impact of that on older Australians, which is in part covered by some concessions, but it's not covered fully, and certainly for folk who are self-funded retirees, who have limited fixed incomes, their capacity to deal with an ever-increasing cost when they don't have money to put aside for a rainy day makes it very difficult for them. So yes, a concern there. We're not satisfied yet that there's a position that we can support, but we'll be continuing to prod government opposition and others about in the development of those policies, ensuring that they're age-friendly as well.
Mr Anil, can I take you back to a slightly broader perspective on a couple of those questions again? There was a lot of discussion about the structuring and the naming of portfolios initially for the new Gillard government, and a lot of talk about symbolism. You've talked about it a bit today, in fact. Do you think it really affects your influence on government or the ability to advance some of your arguments that you're dealing now with a young bloke who's an up-and-comer called Mark Butler, and it's linked to mental health? And the other question, which was raised by Tony, we're now talking about a group which, in terms of defining seniors, starts at 50s. And for some of us who've already passed that landmark, it seems absurdly young. Is there really a homogeneous set of issues that applies to the group of people you represent?
Well, the second question first. No, there's not a homogeneous set of issues there. There are, in fact, in our view, 3 lots of broad issues. One for those who are still in the workplace, the 50 to 65, 67 group, and they're very much around employment and retirement income stuff, that kind of space. The early retireds, the 65 to 75, 80, still healthy, but concerned about their income outlook, concerned about health issues, starting to think about aged care issues, so separate lot there. And then, of course, for the veterans, much more about health and aged care issues at that point. So there's a real breadth of issues, and of course with that some challenges around servicing such a breadth of issues. In terms of dealing with a young bloke like Mark Butler, we were certainly disappointed, as I said in my comments, about the naming of the portfolio, and I guess that's about perceptions as much as anything. But within 2 days of the portfolio being named, I noticed that a leading national daily was reporting the Minister for Mental Health as Mark Butler, and ageing had dropped off altogether. So perceptions, yes, to a point, but it is also about, from our perspective, the message that it sends to the broader community as well. And it's not, in our view, a good message. Having said that, Mark Butler comes from a background in the Miscellaneous Workers Union. A lot of knowledge, it would seem, from his members' perspective anyway, in terms of the operation of aged care. So I think that, with his undoubted intellectual capacity, he should be a good minister.
Thank you. Here's a question from Maurice Riley.
Michael, the sensitive issue of euthanasia has been raised by the Greens this week. I'm wondering what your members are telling you about that and what your policy responses to that be, and if it was they were for it, how should it be funded?
Euthanasia is will for national seniors be as difficult as an issue as it will be for the rest of the community, I'm sure. Some polling which we did about 10 years ago at that time said 75% of members were against it and 25% in favour. The overwhelming reason why people were against it at the time was they didn't trust government to deal with such an important issue. I doubt whether that position has changed in terms of trust of government to manage issues. I think the second thing about the issue at this time is, whilst it's important to a number of people across the community, I also think in terms of older Australians, there are much more significant issues around in terms of aged care and health and dealing with people who are coming towards the end of their life and ensuring that they have the kind of care that's essential and necessary for them. We will welcome the debate, we'll participate in the debate, but we have a very broad church, and I think our response will be reflective of that broad church.
Thank you very much. Michael O'Neill, thank you very much for the past hour. It might have been rather neglected during the election campaign, but seniors policy in all its aspects is certainly going to loom large for the next however long we're talking about with the new arrangements for government. We'd like to give you our usual symbols of please come back and tell us how it's going.
Thanks.
Thank you.